Hey, happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to Mondays with Mike, Atrium edition. That's where we are today. We're out in the Fox 26 Atrium. I say we, I mean me. I'm out here in the atrium. Why? Because it is a beautiful, beautiful day. We have low humidity. The temperature right now is in the mid 60s, and I'm behind a tree, so the light is going to be kind of shining on my face intermittently, but it's just so nice. I figured I might as well do it outside today. So, three topics that I want to go over for today. The first is a big concert coming our way in Houston. The second is what happened in Fort Lauderdale at the end of last week, which is an unbelievable flooding. And then the third is the news on this hurricane season, the first hurricane outlook, and what El Nino has to do with it. Yes, El Nino. We haven't talked about that for a long time. So the first thing I want to say is if you've been living under a rock, this Friday, Saturday, Sunday in Houston, NRG Stadium, Taylor Swift. Yes. Now I'm not going. I want to tell you, I'm not going. I'd kind of like to go. I don't know. I wouldn't want to use up a spot that would be enjoyed by somebody else. But this, if you don't have teenagers, if you don't have young people in your household, I can't express to you how huge Taylor Swift is and how huge the Taylor Swift concert is. I mean, think about the Beatles arriving at JFK Airport in 1964 and the people just going crazy, fainting and just screaming and and all of that stuff. It's like it's really that. It really is. I mean, think about when Elvis went on the Ed Sullivan show. All of that. Probably Michael Jackson is the closest thing in recent memory that I can compare it to. Huge, huge, huge. So we got tickets when they first went on sale, the very first day, and the tickets, I mean, they weren't cheap, but it was like $100 for a ticket. Right now, you can sell those tickets for about $700, 600 or $700. And I actually told my daughters, I said, hey, you know, we could sell all these tickets and have enough money to get you a car, you know. No, no. I mean, this is how important that is. Wouldn't miss it for the world. So I'm really happy that they're getting a chance to go. And my wife is going too. So I got my wife, all three daughters, their friends, and 80,000 of our friends and neighbors and everybody going. So it's a pretty awesome thing. I mean, heck, when I was their age, I was like really excited. Well, when I was a little older, I was like really excited to go see when the Eagles reunited in 1994, and like Robert Plant and Jimmy Page reunited like around 94 ish. So there was a lot of that going on, but no, nothing matches Taylor right now. So anyway, that's like the top headline really here in Houston this week. All right. Secondly, I want to show you what happened in my hometown. So last week we were tracking this very odd, very unusual, um, borderline unprecedented would have been area of low pressure that was south of New Orleans, south of Mobile, and it really took on what appeared to be sort of tropical characteristics. And it never actually gained tropical characteristics, meaning that it never was upgraded to a tropical depression status or a tropical storm status. But boy, did it look like it. And it actually brought a whole slew of moisture with it. Part of it was responsible for this, sort of in an indirect way, but I think you can make a case that this was pretty much directly linked. This was the result of 20 inches of rain hitting my hometown of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Now, what you're looking at right now is drone video. And I don't know what road this is over. I mean, it looks to me like maybe this is Sunrise Boulevard, maybe it's Las Olas, but this is in Fort Lauderdale. Look at the cars. I mean, this looks like Houston, Hurricane Harvey type flooding. People completely caught off guard. just, you know, trapped in their cars, having to abandon their cars. Um, here's another look at, it looks like, yeah, somebody's taking this video from their car. So what, the garage door is coming up and this is what's happening outside. Just unbelievable amount of rain. And a lot of this was due to one storm, really. It wasn't like, so we had heavy, you know, the recent heavy rain that we've had was the result of training thunderstorms, right? You get one storm rolling after another one, and you get that training effect of thunderstorms. In this case, it was really just one storm that parked over Fort Lauderdale, and it was actually a rotating storm. It actually spawned a tornado warning, and and it just continued to dump rain just on that one spot. Now, if you went a few miles to the west, a few miles to the north or south, it was a lot of rain, but not as much. I mean, it was maybe 5 inches of rain or something, but right in that one spot, 20 inches. And so, and a lot of it is like unconfirmed because the rain gauge, as I understand it, the rain gauge at Fort Lauderdale International Airport went out. So it went offline. So, and it was kind of neat to see because, well, I mean, I say neat, I mean, it was brought back a lot of memories, I suppose, to see because, like, you know, my dad worked at Fort Lauderdale Airport for decades. And my brother, in fact, worked there for a while too. And just to see, like, the runway was flooded. It's just amazing. Amazing to see. Sorry. So we got Taylor, we got the amazing Fort Lauderdale flooding. Now let's talk about the hurricane season forecast and El Nino. So let me go ahead and share this again. So this week, okay, oh, there's Fox Weather reporting on the flooding. So this week, Phil Klotzbach and his team from Colorado State University issued their first outlook for this hurricane season. Now, the first outlook is released in April, and then they will subsequently, I think every 2 months through the season, they will adjust the forecast. But there are two main factors that went into this year's forecast. So here we go. So the main one is the return of El Nino. Yes, we actually had what is called a triple dip La Nina. I don't know if you remember us talking about that. Last year was a big thing that it was actually the third hurricane season in a row in which we were in a La Nina pattern. So let me tell you what that means and the fact that this year's El Nino changes things a little bit. So on the screen right now, this is a general look at what happens during an El Nino cycle. So what is an El Nino? An El Nino is unusually warm or above average warm water temperatures here off of the west coast of South America. So this is considered the equatorial regions of the Pacific Ocean. And this map here shows you the average effects of the El Nino. So on average, again, and I say on average because you've got 100 variables here, but on average, you have warm and wet conditions, so very active convection out there in the Pacific Ocean. You have a lot of powerful hurricanes in the Eastern Pacific. So those are the ones that form off the coast of Mexico. And you also, by the way, can have very active weather in California. We've already seen that, right? I mean, ever since January, I think the end of December through the beginning of April, wave after wave after wave of flooding rainfall hitting California. That's very typical of an El Nino pattern. And so it might have been sort of a prediction that El Nino was forming. But notice here on the right-hand side of the map, fewer hurricanes. Fewer hurricanes. Now you may think warm water, more hurricanes. But this is warm water in the Pacific Ocean. And what tends to happen is you have a stronger jet stream that forms across the Atlantic Ocean. So I'll go ahead and zoom up to this. You see the globe here. So the yellow is an El Nino pattern. In an El Nino pattern, it intensifies this jet stream that flows across the Caribbean and the Atlantic Ocean. And so you have wind shear that takes place. So the storm tries to form, the hurricane tries to form, and then it's sort of the top. It sort of gets a haircut from the jet stream, and that's called wind shear. And so in an El Nino pattern, which we are going into right now, the tendency is for there to be fewer hurricanes because of the influence of that stronger jet stream. So it doesn't mean that there are no hurricanes, and it doesn't mean that we won't get a hurricane. It just means that if you took an average of all the El Nino years and all of the strong El Nino years, and then you compare them to all of the La Nina years, or especially strong La Nina years, you would see a strong correlation with fewer hurricanes El Nino, more hurricanes La Nina. And so right now we're going into an El Nino phase. Now I'm going to scroll down here and show you the effects of the La Nina, which we've had now for 3 consecutive years. In a La Nina pattern here, in the Pacific Ocean, you have cooler water. That results in a less vigorous jet stream. It generally means more favorable conditions for development of tropical systems in the Atlantic Ocean. And again, this is not like a, 100% correlation where, like I said, if it's a La Nina, it's not like there's just a sudden eruption of hurricanes and vice versa, but on average, yes. So that's a bit of a change that we have had. And this is one of the complicating factors here too, is that, and this is something you could throw around at the next cocktail party you're at, while you're talking about the El Nino and the La Nina, is the AMO. That stands for the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation. Okay, I'm telling you, this is going to impress people at a party. The Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation. What does that mean? Well, in addition to having this back and forth of El Nino and La Nina, which is a cycle that usually takes about 5 to 7 years, you have this oscillation in the Atlantic Ocean between lots of storms and fewer storms, lots of storms and fewer storms. And that runs on a cycle of about every 20 to 25 years. Now, we went into a period of time in the 1970s and 1980s where we had fewer storms. So there were a lot of storms in the 50s and 60s. There were fewer storms in the 70s and 80s. And then through the 90s, and so far in the 21st century, we've been on this upswing in the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation, AMO. So one of the questions now that forecasters are tasked with, like the folks at Colorado State who come out with this forecast every year, is that, okay, you've got the warm water temperatures in the Atlantic, you've taken into account the El Nino or La Nina, and a bunch of other things too, by the way, that get really into the weeds about like what's happening in the Indian Ocean, what's happening in Indonesia, what's happening in, there are connections in Africa from around the world. So in addition to all of those things, you have to take into account this map that you're seeing right here, where when you're in an active era of this AMO, or the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation, you have these conditions that you see on the screen. You have stronger, wetter wet season in West Africa. Those result in stronger, more potent tropical waves coming off the west coast of Africa. And then those have a more favorable environment in the Atlantic Ocean to strengthen. And so that's why as the years go on, from around 1995-ish through the last couple of seasons, you have this very, very, very active time period where now all of a sudden you get 15 or 17 or 19 storms in a season. And in the case of 2005, we had to go to the Greek alphabet. That was the year of Katrina. Um, so that's the active phase of the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation. And again, in the inactive phase, you're going to have more of a drought situation or a less active wet season. In West Africa, you're going to have stronger um, upper level winds across the Atlantic Ocean, which provide shear. And this is a tough one. See, here we go. So this is actually, and I didn't even look at this, I promise. We went through a less active period from 1971 to 1994. That was a low period of this Atlantic multidecadal oscillation. Now we've gone through like what, 25 years or so of it being in the active phase. So now the question is, are we going back into an inactive phase? You know, we've gotten so used to, sorry, the sun is like, there we go. We've gotten so used to having a zillion storms every year, right? We've had so many years where it's like exhausting, where we've had so many hurricanes. And last year was a little perplexing, right? Remember, we went through the entire month of July and the entire month of August with 0 storms. And then after that, we had this big flurry of activity, ultimately resulting in Hurricane Ian, which, by the way, the look back that the National Hurricane Center did on her, that was the one that hit Florida, Hurricane Ian. They've now rated it as a Category 5. Now, they say that it made landfall as a very strong Category 4, but briefly before it made landfall, it intensified to the west of Naples, Fort Myers, Florida, and briefly became a Cat 5. So, and of course, you might remember the impacts that it had. I mean, just unbelievable storm surge and just devastation. So we've gotten used to that, seeing more storms like that. Last year was puzzling because we went 2 months with nothing and then we had a flurry. So the question is now, are we going back into the less active phase where maybe we're not going to see 15 or 17 storms a year? Maybe we go into one of those periods where we see 8 or 10 or 11 storms a year. I think maybe so, but this is what I'm going to leave you with. And this is the example that I always give. So I mentioned that the 70s and 80s were in that low activity time frame. We had fewer storms. In 1983, Houston was hit by a devastating Category 3 hurricane named Hurricane Alicia. 120-mile-per-hour winds, major damage. The skyscrapers downtown, all of the glass was either pulled out of the windows or I believe was broken by just flying, you know, debris and pebbles and rocks and things like that. And that was in a year in which there were only 4 total storms, and Alicia was the first one and formed in late August. There were other devastating storms that formed in that time frame of low activity. So Hurricane Andrew was one of them. Again, Hurricane Andrew hit Florida, where I'm from, where I grew up. I mean, I'm basically from Houston now, right? But where I grew up, Hurricane Andrew hit in August of 1992, and just like Alicia, it was the A storm. So you went all of June, all of July, most of August with no storms at all. And then the first one is devastating. So keep that in mind. If you start hearing, because NOAA's going to come out with their forecast soon as well, and they may call for below normal activity, but that should not change the way you prepare for this hurricane season. Head to our website. So you might be watching us on the website right now, but if you click on the weather tab, you will find a link to tropics. And on that page, you'll see a quick list. And on that quick list, it was put together mostly by John Dawson, meteorologist John Dawson. And on that list, it's like a 1-page, might be 1-page front and back, of all the information you need down to your county, the evacuation zones, hurricane supplies that you should have, you know, all the preps that you should make for this hurricane season, because it does not matter if there's one storm or 25 storms. You need to be prepared exactly the same each and every year. Thanks for joining me here on Mondays with Mike, and thanks to my mom and my brother who survived the Fort Lauderdale deluge uh, without too many problems. So um, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next week here on Mondays with Mike. Take care.